time to cue the classical music again. Not overlooked, but certainly noteworthy, the Hubsan X4 is arguably one of the most recognizable toy-grade quadcopters out there. Ever since the original X4, the H107 played an important role in popularizing the micro multirotor size class back in 2012. It's been built upon, cloned and rebranded. This is the H107L, casually known as the upgraded Hubsan X4, launched in 2013, which claims to bring a number of subtle improvements to both design and operation. 4 years later, this version still seems widely available. It's actually the first multirotor reviewed on this channel I was able to pick up from a local store. As with earlier installments of RCView Classics, or regular reviews with fancy music in the background, as I like to think of them, the question is not so much if the Hubsan X4 was a good multirotor at the time, spoiler, it was, but rather how it has aged and how it holds up today. Well, let's find out.
RCView Classics. Distinguished, noteworthy, or overlooked?
Drop the bass.
While it won't play into the actual verdict, you just can't talk about the X4 without mentioning its signature look Hubsan has cleverly maintained over all variations of the model, and over time I think has become quite iconic. With its racing stripes and streamlined high-gloss design, it kinda reminds me of a sports car, which, as I'll get into later, isn't completely unfitting, at least for the H107L. The X4 uses a direct drive setup with 7mm brushed motors. Despite being on the small side for a micro quadcopter, it manages to score bonus points with nice-to-have design features like rubber landing feet for traction and LEDs for night flying. The latter are nicely bright and color-coded to help determine the heading, but unfortunately also easily obscured by the completely opaque body. The fact that the H107L is so compact turns from strength to weakness when you consider its maintenance. This is not a quadcopter that feels designed with disassembly in mind, and not the one I would recommend if you have big hands and a love for tinkering. That's not to say you're completely on your own if something fails though. Hubsan do provide some basic information on repairs in the excellent instruction manual, including one of those cool exploded view illustrations. At least in the case of my H107L, Hubsan did not include any form of protection for the propellers. Personally, I don't mind, as the integrated inductrix style design excluded, prop cars have always given me more trouble than worth. But if you want one, you can still get it thanks to the popularity of the X4 line online. The internet is chock full of 3D printed attachments, mod ideas and even complete replacement frames for the model. Not very surprising, also given the popularity of the line, the protocol used for these quadcopters has been reverse engineered and implemented in basically every multi-protocol transmitter solution out there, including of course the ever-popular deviation. However, the protocol requires a different RF module from most toy-grade multirotors, the A7105, meaning if you, like me, only bothered installing the most commonly used module in your deviation transmitter, the NRF24L01, you're out of luck. Well, not completely out of luck. The stock transmitter is pretty decent and a fair bit more advanced than your average toy-grade transmitter. Using only the 2-character display, Hubsan has managed to create a functional, if somewhat confusing, menu system that allows you to switch between modes 1 and 2, reverse various channels, and individually tune the elevator, aileron and rudder for each of the transmitter's 2 rates. Pretty impressive. Hubsan has always aspired to be more than a simple toy-grade brand, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the packaging, which has a level of design and polish not usually seen in this segment. The actual contents is considerably less extraordinary. The quadcopter, transmitter, some spare propellers, a USB charging cable and an instruction manual that really deserves special mention, not because it's poorly translated for an older or different model, but because it's actually pretty freaking exemplary, well written, lots of illustrations and covers all you need to know and then some. I've already talked about the popularity of the X4 line of quadcopters, and with that in mind it should come as no surprise that the H107L has no problem in the flight department, if you know what I mean. If I were to sum up the experience in one word, I would describe it as smooth. It definitely feels like there's some subtle processing being applied to the input, making the response more extreme towards the endpoint of each axis and more precise towards the center. This is a common feature on hobby-grade transmitters known as Expo, and opinions on it differ. Regardless, it'll probably take a little getting used to if coming from another toy-grade quadcopter. Luckily, The X4 is still plenty responsive, and thanks to the configurable transmitter, you have a lot of flexibility to make it fly according to your preference and skill level, from very slow to very fast. I don't know if it's faster than the Syma X11, but it's definitely up there. Very slow and very fast is also how I would describe the two rates, normal and expert, as set up by default. For this review I flew mostly on the expert rates, but with the yaw dialed down as the default was too fast for my liking. While I would say the H107L is a real joy to fly overall, there are a couple of caveats to be aware of. For one, instead of using the by now ubiquitous flip button, flips are performed by kind of wiggling the stick back and forth in expert mode, I guess in an attempt to simulate manual flips. While I haven't done a full-on survey or anything, it seems like almost no one likes this system. Luckily though, with the upgraded model you can at least turn the behavior off. For another, as with the other classics reviewed on this channel, the H107L lacks headless mode, return to home, altitude hold, basically any recent toy-grade feature or gimmick, depending on your opinion of them, you can think of. If you're looking for a very assisted way of flying, the X4 is not for you. With the stock 240 mAh battery, charging takes around 40 minutes and flights in my experience average a respectable 7 minutes, ending in a very generous LVC warning. And that's normally the point where I start wrapping the review up. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, that's all nice and fine, Grandpa, but line of sight flying is so 2013. It's all about FPV these days. The X4 can't handle that. To that I reply, gentlemen, we have the technology. We have the capability. It will be better than it was before. Better,
stronger, faster.
Say hello to the FPV-capable H107L. This might not technically even qualify as a mod, as the FPV part is completely standalone and non-intrusive, meaning it can easily be removed and attached to something else. It's really just one of those all-in-one FPV modules, a 100 mAh LiPo battery salvaged from a broken nano quadcopter, and a 3D printed camera mount. The whole thing weighs only around 8 grams, which is light enough to not significantly affect flight performance, although you'll obviously see an impact on the flight time. The setup even has a few advantages over Hubsan's official FPV version of the X4, the H107D, mainly the much improved field of view. I guess what I'm trying to say is that while FPV doesn't come in the box, it's certainly achievable. Another installment of RCView Classics, another great multirotor. In conclusion, the Hubsan X4 H107L is definitely deserving of its classic status. While as responsive and well handling as previously reviewed classics, what really sets it apart is the configurable transmitter that lets you match the flight characteristics to your skill level. This is something still rarely seen on toy-grade multirotors. If you're an experienced pilot who likes sporty flying, the H107L is a no-brainer, or at least a top contender. If you're a beginner, the excellent instruction manual should provide answers to your questions, and the adjustable rates an easy start yet room to grow. Just be aware that repairs may not be as beginner friendly should they become necessary.